Support for Alabama Aloud comes from Ernest and Hadley Booksellers of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who strive to provide a unique selection of new, used, and rare books from local, regional, and international sources. Information about online orders at ernestandhadleybooks.com.
From Troy Public Radio, this is Alabama Aloud. I'm Don Noble. Alabama Aloud is the only podcast where you can hear Alabama stories read in their entirety. Today, I'll be reading The Byzantine Riddle by Eugene Walter. The Mobile writer Eugene Walter lived for many years in Rome, translated Italian film scripts into English, acted in the Italian cinema, and still had time to write 2 novels and 2 volumes of short stories. This story comes from the collection The Byzantine Riddle and Other Stories, published in 1985, and read here by permission of the estate of Eugene Walter. On Mobile Bay, the late October afternoons are golden and still, long and summery. The group of ladies had finished their tea under the pecan trees and had fallen into a cozy silence, watching ants going off through the grass, struggling with crumbs of kumquat cake. They would have preferred some music, although no one thought of it or mentioned it. The silence remained oddly unbroken, and at last began to weigh on them. Mrs. Warden had the habit of lowering her voice when she had something to impart which she considered serious and worthy of total attention. She lowered it now, as far as it would go, so the other ladies recalled their shimmering minds and willingly gave her the floor, or rather, lawn. She said, "The masculine sense of humor is basically very frivolous, very primitive, and, above all, cruel." "Oh, men never grow up," sighed Mrs. Cantwell, rubbing her eyes and sitting up straight. "I mean," said Mrs. Warden, coming back up to an easier conversational tone, "well, you just take what happened at Bessie de Banfield's last week. If my husband had behaved like that to me after all that happened, I swear I'd have shot him." "What did Tom do?" asked Mrs. Cantwell mildly. "What happened? What was all that happened?" asked the old dressmaker, Miss Grenier, who hadn't been listening, but she pricked up her ears at Mrs. Warden's last words. Men, she conceded, but husbands were her natural enemies. After all, they were slow to pay her neatly written bills, and somehow didn't seem to notice her, tape line about her shoulders, mouth full of pins, even in their very own houses. Mrs. Warden turned to her. "Honey, where have you been? Up on some mousseline cloud?" Miss Grenier almost blushed. "Well, I've been so busy." She kicked a pecan leaf with a pointed white kid toe. "I sewed 3,400 bugle beads on Emily Baxter's train for the Linecoff School coronation. It's a full-time occupation. My eyes get too tired to read the papers." "Whoops! Whoop, Mrs. Warden. You'd never read about this in the papers." "You mean you didn't hear about Bessie's party for the Modern Idea Club?" "She founded it," murmured Mrs. Cantwell, in a there tone. "I wasn't there. I had those bugle beads." "Lord," sighed Mrs. Cantwell. "Neither was I. Billy had fever. Wish I'd gone anyway." "Tell me," said Miss Grenier. "Lord, yes," chimed Mrs. Cantwell. "I could hear it over a dozen times. Sissy embroiders a new detail each time she tells it." "Do not," raged Mrs. Warden. "My memory flickers, that's all." "Come on, hon. Flicker for us now," begged Mrs. Cantwell. Mrs. Warden only laughed. "I tell you what, ladies, let's store away these tea things and fetch that bottle of Jim Beam, which is sitting right on the icebox beckoning to us. I need a nip if I'm going to do a number." They all giggled contentedly and rearranged the scene. Cups were whisked away, and in no time ice tinkled in the long glasses. Then came Mrs. Warden's voice in the prologue, down again to its lowest note. Well, Bessie de Banfield has this big party every year for the Modern Idea Club, which she founded and which she runs, said Mrs. Cantwell lazily. Indeed, she thought we should put our minds on the problems of the day. Every week a different problem. Then at Christmas and every Mardi Gras she gives a fun party, sometimes with a speaker. And always her idea of fun, put in Mrs. Cantwell softly. Her mother was the first Mobile lady to smoke publicly, explained Miss Grenier. She does come up with some clever ideas. That's the Lord's truth. It was her idea to make the Friendship Garden on Hall's Mill Road. And if she hadn't taken the initiative, they never would have saved those stone squirrels on the roof of the d'Olive House. She led the March of Tree Lovers to City Hall that time. I wasn't there, said Miss Grenier. Sissy, you are going to get the details in the wrong order again, admonished Mrs. Cantwell. Tell about the dog now. He doesn't come in yet. If you don't tell about him now, said Mrs. Cantwell, you'll ruin your story by having to slow down and explain about him when he does come in. Tell about the decorations and about the dog before you start the party. What dog is that? Asked Miss Grenier suspiciously. Mrs. Warden closed her eyes patiently against interruptions, then dropped again to her thrilling contralto. Bessie de Banfield is not exactly what you'd call an animal lover. She has been known to bag cats that cross her property to protect the birds, although between us, the cardinals have not put 1 foot in her yard since she cut down those 2 tallowberry trees by the carriage house. Last year, her feeder stations went untouched, save by squirrels, and they cost her $5.95 apiece. F.O.B., Michigan. Sissy, said Mrs. Cantwell gently but firmly, urging her back to the road. Anyway, you all know she's hot on astrology, and she read her forecast for the day, about a year ago, and it said, an unexpected visitor today. Be sure you make him welcome. And then she went out in the yard, and there was this little shaggy dog sitting in a lawn chair like he owned the place, sassy as you please, and wagging up a gale. So she fed him, pried the cockleburs out of his fur, and kept him. What kind of dog? Said Miss Grenier. I'm telling you the story, honey, warned Mrs. Warden. It was just a dog. It had 1 black eye and 1 white, and was shaggy, with a busy, plumy tail. Very well behaved, but he hated horses. Didn't chase cars. She tried to find out where he belonged, but didn't. She got fond of him. Now, the decorations, prompted Mrs. Cantwell in a stage whisper. Bessie it was who chose the club colors and the club motto, quickly related Mrs. Warden. She wanted the motto in Latin or something medieval, but nobody could put it into any of those for her. The motto is, think up and out in every direction. Tom de Banfield wrote out, factes tout, quote, vous voudrez, as the translation, and a lot of people had fun over that. The club colors are blue and gold, and the symbol, don't ask me why, is an old astrolabe that belonged to her papa. She had it sketched to put on the club paper. One year, she had a big old astrolabe made of wire and covered with flowers, which she put on the lawn for the party. Not this year, put in Mrs. Cantwell. She just got some paint. Mrs. Warden overrode lustily. Just got some paint and painted every stick of lawn furniture yellow for the party. Blue linen cushions and tea cloths. Bessie has yellow coreopsis all along her drive, don't you see? And the shady wall of her house is covered with blue plumbago, so everything fitted in. She made everything blue and yellow, including Bessie herself. Silk print. I made it, said Miss Grenier. It was ochre and teal. Everything went together, continued Mrs. Warden. Everything. She went to Three Georges and had mints made in blue and yellow. Then she went to Smith's Bakery and ordered cupcakes made in 2 ways, yellow ones with blue icing and blue ones with yellow icing. They said, "Mrs. de Banfield, it's been our experience that folks won't touch blue cakes. It's just not an appetizing color. But Bessie is like a battering ram when she takes a notion. So she got what she wanted, and more besides, which is part of my tale." "She's biggity," sniffed Miss Grenier. So then she made 2 punches, one colored with blueberries and much too sweet. The other was golden blue, and it was made of peaches and muscatel. She had a blue mayonnaise with yellow egg salad, and a bright yellow mayonnaise with slices of breast of chicken colored blue. "Sounds ghastly," said Mrs. Cantwell. "Nobody touched the blue meat," said Mrs. Warden. "It just sat there, looking disconsolate." "Were the men there?" asked Miss Grenier. "Well, you know, Tom gets them all out on the side porch with a bar wagon. They know by instinct when the ladies have been served and drift in afterwards to the buffet. But they were out there laughing. I think they tell dirty jokes. This year, Bessie asked all the members proper to come an hour early so we could get up a note to send the governor about the sterilization of criminals, which he proposed, and which was coming up for a vote in the State House the day after the party." "There's another thing they can do with men like that," said Miss Grenier thoughtfully. "I heard about it." "What do you mean, hon?" asked Mrs. Warden. "Oh, yes, castrate," said Miss Grenier. "It may be something Fidel Castro invented. Anyway, you know, for criminals. Castrate them." Mrs. Cantwell looked genuinely pained. "I hardly think," she murmured, then turned gently to Miss Grenier. "We'll have a little talk when you come over to do my linen suit." Mrs. Warden went right on. "We were for rehabilitation and sent off our telegram to the legislature, and that was that. Then the party commenced. There were thousands of people, and since the paint wasn't quite dry on the furniture, most everybody stuck, or at least had their clothes ruined. Nobody would eat that blue breast of chicken. There was heaps. Bessie is very old-fashioned about hospitality and believes there's got to be enough to have tons left over afterwards. Her servants have come to loathe chicken salad. Melisande O'Rourke recited Amy Lowell's Patterns. Then Elise DeFeo played The Ritual Dance of Fire and Girl with the Flaxen Hair. They were having the dessert, including those blue cupcakes, when it started. Tom de Banfield, prompted Mrs. Cantwell, was not drunk, just flushed like he gets. All the men had come around by then and were having a big laugh over the blue food. Tom kept making jokes about ptomaine poisoning every time somebody bit into one of those cupcakes. They all laughed, but lots of them left cupcakes with just one bite out. In the midst of all that hoo-ha, that little dog came running in and ran up to Bessie, who was holding court in the patio. She broke off a piece of her cupcake and gave it to him. "And ladies?" She paused for effect, looking at each lady in turn. He just plain dropped dead. "Sissy!" they all cried, meaning, "We don't believe a word of it, but tell the delicious horror again." Now Mrs. Warden rose to her heights. They all felt she should have gone on the stage. She brushed imaginary crumbs off her lap with a languid, punctuating gesture and slowly recited, "She gave him a piece of blue cupcake, is what I am telling you," and the poor little beast immediately croaked. Oh, they were impressed. She sat there looking at the dead dog, then at the bit of blue cupcake in her hand, then at everybody standing around, too staggered to say anything. So she called her husband. "Tommy," she said, "is this animal dead?" So he bent down and had a look. Then he said, very seriously, "Yes, ma'am," with a blue cupcake seething in his jaws. Well, that did it. When he said that, somehow Tom had already sabotaged the party with his ptomaine jokes, but when he said that, the first thing that happened after a terrible long silence when nobody would look at each other, was that Melisande O'Rourke threw up. It sounded like Niagara, right on the flagstones. "Nervous girl, always was," commented Mrs. Cantwell. Whereupon all hell broke loose. Lots of less delicate and more practical souls just put their fingers down their throats and let fly. And I wish you might have seen Marie Louise Fields, Elspeth Bradley, and Emmeline Bradley all bent over the lily pond like the three ungraces. "I'm glad I wasn't there," murmured Miss Grenier. "It sounds plain horrible. Did it harm the goldfish?" "I could die that I missed it," laughed Mrs. Cantwell, brushing tears of unalloyed pleasure from her eyes. "But after all, my papa was a doctor. I reckon I have another kind of sense of humor." "What did the men do? What did you do?" asked Miss Grenier. "We did the same, actually. Marched into the house and got ourselves big slugs of brandy. But that's only the beginning. You know how Bessie rises to an emergency. She took over like a field marshal and had a fleet of ambulances and interns there in a flash. It was a scene of carnage. Yes, a scene of carnage. Upstairs, all those ladies were laid end to end and had their stomachs pumped." "I'm sure it did most of them a lot of good," roared Mrs. Cantwell, rub-a-dubbing her feet in merriment, "especially that bridge luncheon set." "It was a scene of carnage," said Mrs. Warden. "Just a scene of carnage." "Were you pumped out?" inquired Miss Grenier distastefully. "You bet your sweet lolly I was not," cried Mrs. Warden. "I knew not even a coral snake could kill that dog so quick. I saw that he hadn't eaten the piece of cupcake. It was under Bessie's chair." Afterwards, 3 or 4 days afterwards, the newspaper boy told Bessie how he'd seen a truck hit the poor little dog. It had run to Bessie for help. Everybody was threatening suits or to disband the club. So Bessie made that boy come before the meeting and tell what he'd seen. He was tongue-tied when he stood up in front of those ladies in their hats. She had to prod the story out of him. But he was one of those cotton-top up-country boys. Everybody knew he wouldn't lie or make it up. So Bessie was cleared. "That poor little shaggy dog," sighed Mrs. Cantwell. "Well, I don't know that I think Tom is so bad," said Miss Grenier thoughtfully. "If he really said seethed when he examined that dead dog and referred to the cupcake, I feel it was a most precious and apt choice of word. I think it's funny." "That may very well be," glowered Mrs. Warden, "but that wasn't the worst." Late that night, when the victims had been dismissed and the premises mopped up, there was Bessie almost dead with fatigue and anxiety. She didn't collapse until the very end, and she was propped up in bed with her cold towel on her head and trying to take a little cognac. And here comes Tom in a funny plastic hat and carrying an ancient automobile tire pump he found in the garage. He strolled in, took a slug of her brandy, and pumped his pump a little. Wheeze, wheeze. He says, "Excuse me, madam. I represent the Rag Swamp Stomach Pump Corporation. I'd like to tell you about our handy party plan." He didn't. Oh, yes, he did. She really broke down then. But now you'll see why I say the masculine sense of humor is cruel. Cruel! Afterwards, he walked up and down on the side porch outside her bedroom window and ate a whole plateful of blue cupcakes. "He didn't," the others cried. "Not only that," intoned Mrs. Warden tragically, "he made loud smacking sounds as if he enjoyed them." "No," cried Mrs. Cantwell. But Miss Grenier stifled a burst of laughter. Only the others let it pass for a snort of dismay. Mrs. Warden held up her hand imperiously, and silence fell. "The next morning," she said, "he walked into Bessie's room and smiled in the most natural way and held out a plate and said, 'Have a cupcake.'" Now the others were silent in disbelief. "Oh, I don't know," said Miss Grenier shyly. "I've never been married, so I don't know." The masculine sense of humor has always been a Byzantine riddle to me. How do they think up the things they come out with?" "Oh, hon," boomed Mrs. Warden, frowning slightly, "men don't think. They just laugh and scratch and say the first thing that occurs to them. Only women have second thoughts, and even third, and decide which one to use. Besides, the dealings between men and women are full of Byzantine riddles." "Gothic, too," exclaimed Mrs. Cantwell, eyes sparkling with a saucy meaning she had no intention of sharing. Then, very seriously, she handed about an imaginary plate. "Have a cupcake," she said mildly, at which they all hooted. But Mrs. Warden quickly recovered herself and, very much in charge, held up an admonishing hand. "Enough! I've told you how it happened." She placed her empty glass on the table with a slow and beautiful gesture of antique finality. This story comes from the collection The Byzantine Riddle and Other Stories, published in 1985, and read here by permission of the estate of Eugene Walter. We hope you don't keep Alabama Aloud all to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend. Better yet, write us a review in the iTunes store. It helps other people find the podcast. Alabama Aloud is a production of Troy Public Radio and produced by Austin Toy and Kyle Gassett. Special thanks to Matt Clower, Buddy Johnson, Michelle Mowry, and Jennifer Horn. Alabama Aloud is made possible in part by a grant from Alabama State Council on the Arts. So, until next time, when you'll hear more of Alabama Read Aloud, I'm Don Noble. Thanks for listening.